Good evening, and welcome to tonight's discussion, one of a series of virtual events Metrolinx is holding in September and October for all of the Ontario line station areas. My name is Joseph Thornley. I'm the CEO of 76 Engage, Metrolinx's public engagement partner for virtual consultation, and it's my privilege to be your moderator for tonight's event. As promised during our previous session on September 23, our focus tonight will be on the Lakeshore East Joint Corridor Early Works Report. If you have questions about other parts of the Ontario line, you can register for other events or view the recordings of the sessions we've already held on other topics simply by looking at the live meeting link at the top of your page. But tonight we're going to be focusing on the Lakeshore East Joint Corridor Early Works Report. One important note, we do have closed captioning. So if you need closed captioning, you can turn that on simply by moving your cursor down to the bottom of the video that you're watching and clicking on the CC in order to have closed captioning. So as we're starting tonight, we should take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers and immigrants in this generation or in generations past. Metrolinx declares its commitment to building meaningful relationships with Indigenous peoples. Metrolinx acknowledges the historic and continued impacts of colonization and the need to work towards meaningful reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. We acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on lands covered by 20 treaties and that we have a responsibility to recognize and value the rights of Indigenous nations and peoples and conduct business in a manner that is built on the foundation of trust, respect, and collaboration. Also, just before we start, let's take a minute to consider safety. Safety is a constant theme in Metrolinx's operations to keep you safe, to keep employees safe. They work hard to ensure the safety of all of us. If you see someone dangerously close to a rail line, or identify a safety hazard, call 911 or Transit Safety 24 hours a day, and Transit Safety at 1-877-297-0642. So we've scheduled the session to last an hour and a half. We'll start off with a brief presentation, and then we'll take as many questions as possible. You'll see that the presentation can be downloaded immediately above where we have the speakers listed on your presentation page below the video. You can also look at the full East Line report if you click on Learn More under the heading East Harbor Station in the right margin of your page. And there's a page there with details on the full report as well as tonight's presentation. During the course of the event, we'll be answering questions, first from the written questions. Those that have been voted for, we'll try and answer the most voted for topics. Of course, if during the presentation someone offers new information and you want to ask a question about it, you can always add a question during the meeting. And even if we don't get to your question tonight, Metrolinx will make an effort after the meeting to go through the questions and answer all of the topic areas. Also tonight, we have a call-in option. So after we've done some of the written questions, which I'll be posing to the panel, we'll go to the Zoom room with Georgina Collymore, who will be our moderator there. And when that time comes, there's a yellow Join Zoom button on the page right below where the video is. So you can click on that and go over to the Zoom room if you want to ask your questions out loud. We want to cover as many questions as possible, so we'd ask that you try and keep your question to the point and reasonably short. Once more, if you require closed captioning, just click on the CC at the bottom of your video link and you can have it on. So I'd like to introduce our panel now. Tonight, we have Richard Tucker with us. He is the Ontario Line Project Director. With him is Malcolm Mackay, the sponsor for the Ontario Line Project. Also, Carrie Schaefer is here tonight. She's a senior manager on our environmental programs and assessment team. And we have a new person on tonight's presentation team. First time here, I think, Brian Bolness. He's an acoustic engineer working for ACOM, who are a consultant for Metrolinx, and they've carried out the noise and vibration studies. Welcome, Richard, Malcolm, Carrie, and Brian. And just before we start the presentation, I'd also like to take a moment to recognize that we have several elected officials in attendance tonight. MP Julie DeBruzen, MPP Peter Tabbins, and Councillor Paula Fletcher. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And we'll probably hear from you later in the meeting. So it's time for our presentation. Malcolm, would you like to take over?
Thank you very much, Joseph. I really appreciate that, and welcome everyone. We appreciate you being here this evening and sharing some time with us. Tonight's discussion and presentation is about the Lakeshore East Joint Corridor Early Works Report, which is in the east segment of the Ontario Line. Tonight we're going to cover noise and vibration, the natural environment, the retaining and noise wall heights, and the current engagement that's going on surrounding those, the construction of the bridges through this area, and of course our question and answer period. We also have the Zoom room available, so there'll be a number of people that will be able to speak to us directly. I'm just going to pass it over to Carrie. Carrie?
Great, thanks, Malcolm, and good evening, everyone. Very happy to be here. So as you might recall from past sessions, I do like to provide an overview of the environmental assessment process before we get into some of the more detailed discussions on the joint corridor. So as you'll recall from hearing from past meetings, our EA process is being completed in accordance with Ontario Regulation 34120, and this is a new regulation, EA regulation for the Ontario Line. It does very much resemble the transit project assessment process that you're used to seeing for Metrolinx projects. The main difference that we've noticed from the regulation is that there is requirements for additional reporting in the environmental conditions report, early works reporting, and what this does is creates additional points of contact and engagement with communities and interested parties. Now, we've already completed quite a few of the components of this EA process, starting with the environmental conditions report in late 2020, and this evaluated all of the environmental baseline conditions within the broader Ontario Line study area. Now, the Ontario Line regulation sets out a very specific process for early works components of the project, and you'll recall that early works are elements of the Ontario Line project that are set to advance ahead of the main contract work in order to really de-risk the project and create schedule efficiencies. But of course, before these components can move ahead, we have to assess the potential environmental impacts on this construction activity and put forward mitigation measures to ensure that adverse impacts are minimized and commitments to future works are adhered to. So really, in essence, the early works reports are really standalone environmental assessment reports that focus solely on the early works portions of the Ontario Line. And to date, we've completed a number of early works reports. As you can see here for the Exhibition Station Early Works, Corktown Station Early Works, Lower Don Bridges, and Don Yard Early Works. All of these early works reports have followed the same process as dictated by the regulation. Now, the last piece of our regulation is the Environmental Impact Assessment Report. And this report will study the remainder of the Ontario Line project, the main works project, including the operations of the line. So really, for all intents and purposes, very much resembling our typical EA process report that you're used to seeing, assessing proposed project, putting forward commitments to mitigation and future work. Now, this will be available in draft early 2022 and will undergo a 30-day public review period. Comments and feedback will be incorporated into a final environmental impact assessment report that will follow. Now, here you can see a schedule of where we are in our EA process and how it aligns with our construction schedule, noting once again that no construction work will take place until the early works report is reviewed and approved by the Minister of Environment. So you'll also notice on this schedule below, there is a box for vegetation clearing here. As many of you are likely aware, vegetation clearing associated with the GO expansion work has already commenced in certain areas along the Lakeshore East corridor and along our broader network. You'll likely recall that this was covered in the Lakeshore East EA that has already been completed and approved some time ago. Now, we are expecting this work to continue and take place in parts of the joint corridor starting later this fall, and we will be back to you with more specific dates and schedules on this. However, please rest assured that any removals that are required for the Ontario line will not advance until the early works reports have been completed and reviewed by the Minister. So if we can flip ahead a slide, please. So here you can see the process we're following and staying consistent with for all of our early works reports along the Ontario line, as is dictated by our EA regulation. So we currently have available for public review draft early works for both East Harbour Station and Lakeshore East Joint Corridor. These were made available on September 23rd for public review, as is required by the regulation. And similar to all of our early works reports and also our transit project assessment process, our typical EAs, the review period is set at 30 days. What's unique about the Ontario line process is the requirement under the regulation to actually take the feedback we receive and consider this feedback we receive during this time and use it to really update our final early works reports. And these will be made available in early December. So once final reports are posted, the Minister of Environment has up to 35 days to complete their review. Again, no construction activities will take place in these areas until the EA reports have undergone this review by the Minister. And then, of course, followed by a statement of completion. So if we flip to the next slide, please. So this just provides a bit of a reminder of the scope of the Lakeshore East early works. Just running through this quickly, it includes replacement of some bridges, new bridges, foundation for overhead catenary systems for electrification, as well as retaining walls and noise barriers, which Malcolm is going to speak with to a little bit later on. And really encouraging the community to take some time to review the reports. There are also slide decks available on our website that summarize some of the key findings by environmental discipline, which might be helpful with some of the more dense material. We do realize it's quite a bit. And just another reminder that our comment period will close on October 24th. And in no way marks the end of our consultation with this community. We will continue to be here to consult on key components of the project as it advances into detailed design. So we were out here a few weeks ago to introduce the EA reports, and we're back today to speak in a bit more detail about the components of the report that we understand are of most interest to this community. We've heard a lot of questions about noise and vibration, particularly with respect to the operational assessment that was made available as part of our report. And we can appreciate that this can get quite technical. And so we've invited our noise engineer, Brian Bolness, here tonight to take us through a bit more of a deep dive into noise. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian to start with an overview of construction noise, and then he'll move on to the operational assessment. So Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Carrie. So during construction, you might be able to notice some noise and vibration above existing levels, but mitigation measures are going to be introduced as much as we can to minimize this. So a few examples of this: we want to meet any MECP, Ministry of the Environment, regulations for construction equipment. We want to limit activities causing the most noise and vibration during the daytime whenever we can. We want to use muffling devices, make sure all of equipment is in good working order, use noise screening whenever we need to, or hoarding that is upgraded of better density and material. And for any areas like within the kind of zone of influence of vibration, which is a conservative area where we estimate maybe this might be affected by vibration, we recommend noise and vibration monitoring, where we can keep an eye on the levels and make sure we meet any limits, for example, bylaw 514 in Toronto. And in addition to all that, communication with the community, of course, whenever activities are expected, especially at the nighttime. So could we move to the next slide, please? Okay, so this is just an overview of the operational noise and vibration assessment. So we did 28 locations, worst case locations. Worst case is another way to say typically the closest, although that's not always the case. Sometimes it's higher up in the air and benefiting from less shielding from buildings and things like that. Metrolinx has committed to installing noise walls with a minimum height of 5 meters throughout the corridor, seamless noise walls. And based on this, the noise barriers are expected to reduce noise levels to existing levels or below at the majority of locations, with the few exceptions being predicted to be a few high-rise buildings. And at these locations, some are expected to be very minimal, maybe not even perceptible, and at other locations, it might be a little bit noticeable, but not really considered significant. We move on to the next slide, please, and I'll get into some more details on the noise and vibration assessment. So to begin with, we take all of our inputs. That includes for both existing and future conditions. So this is how many trains per day on the line, what types of trains on the day per on each track, the speeds of the trains, the consist of the train, like how many locomotives, how many cars. We take into condition the ground elevations and any screening in between, ground effects, and then we make an existing and a future model, and we can subtract one from the other to get our predicted noise impacts. And based on that, we can design noise barriers, extents and lengths, and materials, and see what we can do, whether we can meet criteria, meet existing levels to where we want them to be. And yeah, it's predicted that at most of these locations, Metrolinx has kind of gone above and beyond criteria here. We're trying to get to our existing levels, 16-hour LEQs and 8-hour nighttime LEQs. To explain LEQ a little bit, this might be useful. We're basically taking into account all of the fluctuations in noise throughout that time period. So this really accounts for the number of pass-bys per day, which I know is of concern. But the main story to take away from the results is that, yes, there will be more pass-bys, but the pass-bys will be significantly quieter, and on average, noise levels will be less than existing or existing or below. Okay, let's talk about noise walls a little bit. So how do noise walls work? So noise walls block the direct path between the noise source to the receiver. Some noise is absorbed into the barrier, some noise reflects back the other way. Some noise, a fraction of it goes through the barrier, although this is very negligible in comparison to any other sound. And some noise goes over the top of the barrier, the diffraction, and it takes a much increased distance to get to any receptors, thus lowering the noise to basically a fraction of what it might be if there was no barrier there. Additional components could be introduced as well, such as additional absorptive material on the sides of the panel. Although there is a trade-off here, this might lead to the less letting in of light. So there is a bit of give and take as far as that goes. Let's talk about the immersive sound demo next, so we can just change the slide. So this demonstration here, I'm sure some of you have looked at this already. So the main goal of this was to kind of demonstrate the difference in noise characteristic between the GO trains and the Ontario line trains, and also to give an idea of the reduction in noise barrier might provide at these locations in the videos. So I highly encourage everyone, if you haven't already, to check out this website and listen to the intro video, and then navigate over to the listen page and select your locations and have a listen. And the most fun thing to do is to kind of click between the without barrier, the with barrier, the existing in real time, and get a real sense of that barrier effect at these locations.
So thanks, Brian. I think back to me now. So moving away from the built environment, we wanted to spend a little time talking again about the natural environment, trees, green space. And of course, we recognize this is extremely important to the community, and it's of the utmost importance to us too. We are doing everything we can to protect trees, and we'll continue to do so as we advance our detailed design. And as you've heard Richard say, and from previous presentations, our design utilizes an innovative T-well approach, and it's really allowing us to do most of the work from inside of the corridor. And that really is going to help minimize our construction footprint and the amount of trees and green space we would need to remove, largely contained within the corridor, and we're reducing any requirements outside the corridor as much as possible. However, we know that there are some trees and vegetation that will need to be removed within the corridor for both the Ontario line and the already approved GO expansion project. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, vegetation clearing associated with the GO expansion early works, it's already commenced in various locations along our network and even further locations along the Lakeshore East corridor. So this work was already assessed and covered off in the Lakeshore East EA that has been approved. So we are just expecting this work to continue and take place in parts of the joint corridor starting later this fall. And once again, we'll be back to share exact timelines on this. Again, wanting to convey that any removals that are required for the Ontario line, those won't advance until the early works report have been completed and reviewed by the minister. And as is always the case, any removals that have to be done are going to be done with the utmost care to ensure we're protecting wildlife, bird and bat habitat, protecting remaining trees with barriers, and of course compensating for any vegetation with local planting projects within the community where we can do so. So if we jump to the next slide, please. Metrolinx is working with the city on tree replacement and compensation strategies for any removals required outside of the corridor. Permits and typical compensation ratios will apply to these removals, and arborist reports for this are still underway as we continue to advance detailed design. We are finalizing this. We're triple checking to make sure every tree that is slated for removal, we absolutely have to remove, and there is no opportunity to avoid, because that is first and foremost our priority. So the arborist reports are still underway, but we expect that those will be available to the public later this year or very early next year. And the removals associated with this will likely take place towards the latter half of 2022. We are also working with City Parks, Forest and Recreation, as well as the Toronto Region Conservation Authority, to explore park enhancements and tree compensation programs for your community. And as I mentioned last time, we know that green space is limited here. We know there's not a ton. So those participating tonight, we really encourage you to reach out if you know of any tree planting opportunities in your area, or even opportunities for the wood reuse. We'd love to hear from you. Please do let us know. We really value your ideas and your input here. And Malcolm will show you how to get in touch a little bit later in the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Malcolm to address some of the questions around retaining wall heights, noise wall heights, and landscaping options. Okay.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Brian. If we go to the next slide. The next five slides, we've created renderings to give a visualization of what the parks through the joint corridor area will look like potentially. We've taken the liberty of doing treatments on the retaining walls and provided clear noise walls, but those are the subject of further consultation with the public and with the as well with the city. This particular view is McCleary Playground. The retaining walls are anywhere from 5 to 7.5 meters high in this area, with the sound wall or the noise wall being 5 meters on top of it. The McCleary Playground will actually increase in size by 300 square meters as a result of the build of the Ontario line. Next slide. This is a view of Jimmy Simpson Park. In Jimmy Simpson Park, the retaining walls are anywhere from 4 to 5.5 meters in height, with 5-meter noise wall on top of it. And once again, this view shows a vegetated wall with the clear noise wall. Jimmy Simpson Playground is increasing in size by 700 square meters as a result of the Ontario line. There's another treatment available at Jimmy Simpson Park if we go to the next slide. What we can do is we can create a small berm at the edge of the retaining wall, and we can put seating around the edges. And this is just an example of the toolkit of parts that are available that could be used to finish the retaining walls and the sound walls through the entire corridor. Next slide. So this is Bruce Mackey Park at Degrassi Street. Here, the noise walls are 5 meters high, with the retaining walls 6 to 7.5 meters high. Bruce Mackey Park is increasing in size by 1,100 square meters, again, as a result of the rebuilding of the corridor by the Ontario line. Next slide. This is Bruce Mackey at Wardell. Here, the heights are anywhere from 2 to 3.5 meters. And again, with the the noise wall being 5 meters in height, and in this instance being demonstrated as clear materials. Next slide. So this is what we call a roll plot. And what we've got here is the heights of the retaining walls throughout the joint corridor area. And it ranges anywhere from 0 to 7.5 meters through the Gerrard to Eastern rail corridor. Next slide. We've launched a consultation website, Metrolinx Ontario-line-engagement.etho.net. This survey is open until October 14th, and what we're trying to collect here is your thoughts on noise and retaining wall finishes and materials, so that we can incorporate them in discussion into the build for the Ontario line. Next slide. And I'll pass it over to Richard.
Hey, Malcolm, thanks very much. So we wanted to go into a little further detail about exactly where all these bridge replacements are occurring. So we're absolutely clear where everything's happening. So if you're looking at this and you see the legend, the squares are where we're replacing bridges and different scopes of work. If we start on the left-hand side of the diagram, you can see that's Eastern Avenue. And there's bridges being replaced there as part of the East Harbour Station being built there. And each square, the square on the north side is essentially the Ontario Line Bridge, and the square on the south side is the GO Bridge as part of the GO Encore, GO expansion development plans. So these bridges are being replaced at the same time to minimize the effect on the area, and to concentrate the construction time period so it's efficient and non-disruptive as possible. If you keep moving further to the right or to the north and east, you can see it next. We have a bridge at Leslieville. The one on the south side, being in blue, is the GO Bridge. And then on the north side, we have the bridge for Ontario Line, which incorporates the Leslieville station. The GO Bridge will be built as part of the early works, and the station and related bridge will be built as part of the North project, which is starting in 2024. As we move further to the east and to the right on the diagram, you can see there at Dundas, we have again, the GO Bridge on the south side, and the Ontario Line Bridge on the north side, again, built at the same time with the same timing to allow for the swings in the tracks and to allow us to build the corridor in a very efficient and quick manner. Again, a little further to the east, and a little further to the right, we have Logan Avenue. And then as we move all the way to the right-hand side of the page, we have the Gerrard Station, which, similar to the Leslieville Station, would be built as a bridge and as a station as part of the bridge. And that again would be as part of the North Civils project, which is due to kick off in 2024. On the south side there, you can see the dotted rectangles, and that's some minor modifications to the existing GO bridges to allow for the Ontario Line bridge to be installed at this location. With that, back to you, Malcolm.
Thank you, Richard. The upcoming public engagement for the ACE segment, as we indicated, the retaining wall and noise wall public consultation website is open, and we're hoping that you can provide feedback. We're going to be closing that website on October 14th, and we'll be providing feedback of the compiled data and make that public. The East Harbour and Lakeshore Joint Corridor Early Works Report is currently open for review, and that will be closing until October 24th, 2021. And once again, your feedback is crucial and will be made public through the Early Works reports. And then in early 2022, the Environmental Impact Assessment Report will be issued for the entire project. Next slide. So we'd like to thank you for your time this evening. We're going to be going into the question and answer session. We're grateful for your input, and we're hoping that you'll sign up for the e-newsletter at metrolinx.com/Ontario Line. You can phone us at 416-202-5100 or email us at ontarioline@metrolinx.com. And with that, I'll send it back over to Joseph.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm, Carrie, Richard, and Brian. So we have about an hour for questions. Let's start out with some of the questions that you have submitted already. And I think the first question, we'll talk about the alignment, underground alignment. And the questioner says this question just won't go away, and would like to submit two questions, or would like you to answer two questions. First, what is the cost and cost difference between the current plan using the rail corridor and the underground Monroe option? So the current plan and the Monroe option, as they're calling it, e.g. continue on Eastern to Carlaw to Gerrard to Pape Station. And then secondly, what alternatives are there, and what concessions can the local community provide to reduce the cost difference to allow the underground alignment to proceed? E.g. go under Eastern to Pape, eliminating the Carlaw jog, and or B, using cut and cover for the portion of the line from East Harbour Station to Pape Station and Minton Place. So could you please address the issue of the cost differential and whether there's any way to reduce that and make it possible to go with the underground alignment?
Sure, I can answer that, Joseph. Thank you for the question. It's a question that we expect. We understand the concern that the community has about utilization of the GO corridor for the subway. I'd like to preface this with an introduction that the Lakeshore East GO expansion project was going to be going through here regardless of the Ontario line. That actually provided us an opportunity to be able to piggyback and work together with the other project to come through this area once with the entire project. So it was advantageous from that point. There was always going to be construction through this corridor, and this is part of it. And with the original plans, there was not going to be continuous noise walls, which are a great improvement to the performance, noise and vibration performance of the joint corridor. So that's the early work discussion. So now the underground option. So during our initial business case, we did compare the relief line south to the Ontario line with the current alignment. And the Ontario line performed much better from a business point of view. And but it was up to us as the designers to be able to come up with solutions for the inherent problems that might exist with an above grade section of the corridor. And, we heard quite clearly from the community that noise was an issue. Disruption to the parks was an issue. Tree removal was an issue. And you've seen through the presentation tonight and previously that noise is actually, in most instances, going to be quieter here as a result of the Ontario line. Our design teams and our construction teams have put together means and methods of accessing the corridor without using parks, be able to ensure that the construction process is as undisruptive as possible. We also have ways to provide a very attractive build here, and that is part of the public consultation effort that's going forward. And that, as we told you earlier, is a website that's available now. We also made the parks bigger as a result of the Ontario line, not smaller, not more disruptive, but actually bigger in all instances. So those are a few of the things that are supportive of the Ontario line. But let's talk about the reality of an underground alignment. Underground is more expensive. And the alignment that, the modified, I'm going to call it a hybrid alignment that goes across at East Harbour Station and Ducks Underground, it is not without its challenges. It looks a lot like the Ontario line. It has a Carlaw station, it has a Gerrard station. Those two stations in and of themselves are over $600 million worth of construction, and that was the TTC's pricing of those stations. The alignment is actually 300 meters longer as a result of the alignment. As well, you've got to still deal with very large utilities down Booth Avenue in the form of Enbridge. A very large gas plant there that can't be affected, which means we have to dip underground very quickly and then get that turn to go north on Carlaw. Carlaw Station or the station at Leslieville are key stations for us. They're an interchange station with the Queen streetcar, and it's important. It's vital for us to have a good interchange with those stations. So that's not a choice. Deletion of a station here is not an option. As we go further north of Carlaw, we have the Midtown Toronto Interceptor Sewer, which was a problem that we had with the Relief Line South, and we would have problems with this alignment. So the overall cost difference between the two alignments is over $800 million, of which over $600 million of that is just in the two stations alone. There are some credits that go offsetting with the deletion of the work that would be associated with the at-grade and at-grade stations and the at-grade alignment. But the net is about $870 million in more expensive to do the underground alignment as has been discussed. All those things together make the Ontario line with its mitigation a more attractive and we firmly believe the right solution for Toronto, the right solution for transit, and ultimately at the end of the day, the right solution for the community because of the way that we can mitigate some of the perceived disbenefits associated with the above ground alignment. The access to the stations is much better with the Ontario line alignment, which makes transfer times less. And so the questioner also asked about doing things elsewhere to try and save some money to pay for this underground alignment. Well, the cut and cover down PAPE is disruptive and leads to a longer construction time. And because of the high water tables through here and the soft soils, it is not easy construction as well as the very narrow right-of-way that PAPE Avenue is. It does not lend itself to that form of construction for us. So we do believe quite sincerely that we have the right solution. We are understanding of the concerns that the community has, and we're working quite diligently to make sure that we mitigate and address every single concern that the community has. And that's what these consultations are for, to bring those to the forefront so that we can consider them and we can put together programs to be able to deal with them. Joseph, back to you.
Thank you for that, Malcolm. You provided a lot of information. There was another question which actually had more votes, and I just want to follow up with that because you provided information. This question says, you will never convince this community that you've chosen the best alignment until you respond to our request to provide a detailed analysis of the underground Monroe option. So you had talked about having costed it out and examined it. Will you provide that analysis to the public?
So that's what this is. This is the analysis. The IBC is the analysis of the relief line. This costing information that I've shared is the result of the work that's been undertaken. We did actually design that alignment. We did have our profiles, our vertical and horizontal profiles created. We used information from the relief line south to be able to price the stations running where the alignment was similar to the relief line south. So that work is complete, and our path forward right now is with the current alignment, the current plan for the Ontario line, and the extra costs, the over $800 million in extra costs would have a very negative impact on the business case. We do 3 business cases. We do an initial business case, we do a preliminary design business case, then we do a final business case just before we start construction. And all those things, we want to see the best business case, the best travel times, the best customer experience. And we also want to make sure that we've mitigated and dealt with all the community issues along the entire alignment. And we recognize that there are issues that are being brought up by the city and the community, and we're addressing those. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. I totally understand what you're saying about having done it. Is that initial business case available to the public? If someone requested it, would they be able to get it?
Yes, the business case was issued in July 2019, and then that's the comparison of the relief line south to the Ontario line, and the preliminary design business case is also available.
Thank you. Okay, we can't see who asked that question because they asked it anonymously, but there's a contact us form. So if whoever asked that question would like to obtain that report that was released already, they could do that via the contact form. Just contact here on the page. Let's move on to tree removals. Carrie, you spoke about tree removals, and I just want to put this question to be sure that your presentation jives with the question that was being asked. And the questioner about tree removals is asking why the plan for tree removals is not part of the early works report, and is talking about only having 30 days and they're not included, nor timeline for the removals. So how does the community actually have input onto the tree removals?
Well, thanks for the question, and thanks, Joseph. So the early works report, it does provide a project footprint, and that includes the actual corridor itself. Now, as a conservative estimate, we assume that we'll need to remove the majority of the trees within the corridor. And as was previously indicated, I think Malcolm just touched on this as well, the majority of the corridor trees were already planned to be removed as a part of the GO expansion project. Now, these removals have already started in specific locations along the corridor, as you heard me say earlier. And so some of that will be continuing on in the joint corridor segment later this fall. And I mentioned we'll be back with specific details on exact timing of that. Now, additional Ontario line trees within the corridor will only be removed once the environmental assessment report has been reviewed and completed. Now, beyond the corridor, We are working through an arborist report now. We'll be staying within any trees that need to be removed. We will be staying within the project footprint. And we're just finalizing this now. As I mentioned, we're really making sure we're really challenging ourselves to protect every tree possible. So the arborist report's just being finalized now, and we expect that that will be available late this fall or early 2022. And we'll be sharing that report with you and coming, and providing opportunities for comment. And we'll be seeking all permits and approvals. Now, in terms of compensation, we're following our Metrolinx vegetation guideline, which dictates compensation requirements, and all applicable city bylaws that dictate compensation ratios as well. And wherever possible, we'll be prioritizing plantings in your community. So to get to the question on feedback, there is a 30-day review period where we do request that you provide feedback on anything you've heard today, anything within the report, any commitments to future work that you've heard today. Happy to take that feedback. We'll be taking that, considering that, and then using the feedback to actually update our final early works report. And we'll also be back again, as I mentioned, the EA report, the EA consultation period. While it is a 30-day period, our consultation doesn't end past that. So we have lots of opportunities to come back out and talk to you. As I mentioned, an arborist report will be available shortly, and we'll be making that available for you and coming back out to talk as well. So, Joseph, back to you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask you a question that was actually submitted in writing while you were presenting, and it relates to the 30 days. And the questioner is asking whether or not you will extend the 30-day limit for submitting comments. And they are saying, in effect, you released the early works report for the east segment on September 23 on the same day as the early works report for the East Harbor Station. That gives the public until October 24th to go through hundreds of pages of information on both of these, which is a very tight timeline. And the ask is, will you extend the 30-day time period so the public has more time, maybe November 30th or some other time? Is there any chance of extending that 30-day window?
Great, thanks for the question, Joseph. And so I do want to, I'm not sure if we can call back the slide on the early works report process, but maybe I'll speak to it, and if we can pull that back, that would be great. But as I did go over in a bit of detail at the beginning, there is a regulated process here that we follow. And the typical timeline for all of our EA public review periods is 30 days. Now, that's not just with the Ontario line regulation, but that's also with our transit project assessment process. So appreciate that this is dense material, but it's not unusual. We've had lots of very, very dense reports that were put out for 30-day review. We've tried our very best to make this this technical information as digestible as possible. As I mentioned, there's lots of useful information that's summarized in slide decks on our website that helps sort of synthesize some of the technical information and present the key findings there. So I think it is worthwhile checking that out to sort of provide that summary. We need to close out this period of 30 days so that we also can, as an additional requirement of the Ontario line, we actually have to take the feedback you provide, which we're happy to receive, and continue to contemplate that and consider the issues, concerns, questions you might raise during that time, and make any adjustments or tweaks to our final early works report during the remaining time of the 65 days. So after 65 days, we are required to provide a final early works report, and that's the time where it starts the clock for the Minister of Environment review. So appreciate the challenge of reviewing this material, and whatever we can do to make that easier for you, we happily will do. We've done our very best to sort of, as I mentioned, synthesize material and provide useful tools, and taken some extra time to come out and talk to interested parties as much as possible. We're not really able to extend it beyond that point for the reasons that I just mentioned. And I do want to just once again just emphasize that although there is this public review period, conversations on noise walls, on tree removals, things like that, those can continue on well past the public review period for the EA report. We will be back to the community many times. We value your feedback. We want to hear what you have to say, and we'll continue to do so as we move through the Ontario Line process.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks.
To everybody who is here, thank you very much for that answer. To everybody who's here, if you want to ask a question verbally, you can do so by clicking on the Join Zoom button, the yellow Join Zoom button that appears just below this video panel. And we're going to do one more question here from the pre-submitted questions and then go over to Gina Collymore in the Zoom room. So if you want to ask your question out loud, now is the time to click on that button and hop over and raise your hand in the Zoom room. So I wanted to ask a question about the noise levels. You spoke about the noise levels. There's a question about peak levels versus average noise levels. And can you explain the difference between average noise levels and peak noise levels? Where is the data addressing peak, and have you accounted for diesel trains with 1 or 2 locomotives, 6 or 12 cars? How have you developed that noise profile?
Sure. So first, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the guidelines and the protocol that we work to. This was the MOE/GO and MOE/TTC criteria for transit assessments. So what they asked for there is the LEQ 16-hour for daytime and the LEQ 8-hour period for nighttime. And these can be thought of as your sound energy averages over those time periods. So again, you're accounting for all the fluctuations. So you're accounting for how loud the train pass-bys are, as well as how many during that time period. So these LEQ values over these periods of time really are kind of a way to assess a lot of different components, like so the amplitude as well as the frequency of the pass-bys. In comparison, there's the L peak. The L peak is basically just the highest possible noise level at any given moment. There is no criteria for this. We worked to the 16-hour LEQ, the 8-hour LEQ, and then for Ontario Line trains, the L pass-by metric. And the L pass-by metric is the sound energy just over the pass-by time, which is probably the closest thing to an L peak in the report you can think of, but not exactly. It's over the pass-by time. So yeah, we use those metrics to account for a lot of different aspects as it comes to noise, and not just the peak. And maybe I'll explain LEQ a little more for a second here.
Please do.
Sure. So LEQ is your equivalent continuous sound level over a period. So maybe if you imagined 2 people have 8 hours to fill up a big tub with water, and one person sprays a lot, a very high flow rate, then stops, then a very high flow rate, then stops, a very high flow rate, then stops, and then the other person wants to fill that tub at the exact same time, they just spray the water out continuously at the exact same flow rate. So that exact flow rate is kind of your average throughout the day, and that's basically what an LEQ is for sound energy. I believe the other question there was, have we accounted for diesel trains with 1 or 2 locomotives and 12 or 6 cars? Yes, we have. You can see all that data. I believe it's in Appendix C, and the labels for those is you have the D2 L12 and you have D1 L6 to represent those if you're looking for a label for those.
Okay, and for me as a layperson, if I was thinking about the average noise level, but then I wanted to get a sense of the peak noise level, how would you tell me I should think about it? What are the key numbers and or indicators that I need to fasten upon?
For L peak, if you wanted to get an idea, you could maybe listen to the sound demo videos and see what it's kind of like at those locations, and just kind of listen for that loudest moment, and you can compare the with barrier to the without barrier. That might be a bit of a good illustration on that.
Okay, the sound demo for people who are on the page, you can actually see in a black bar right above where you submitted your questions and voted for them. There is a link there to the sound demo if you want to go there to get a sense of the experience. So let's, because I understand there are a number of people who are in the Zoom room who would like to ask questions. So Gina Collymore, are you ready to take questions in the Zoom room?
Hi, Joseph. Yeah, we're absolutely ready to take questions. All right, so our first one is from MPP Tabbins. MPP Tabbins, thanks for joining us tonight. If you can go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask your question live.
Great, thanks very much. I appreciate being able to ask this question. I know you have a ration on these, so I'll try and fit this in as best I can. The document that we have talks about protocols for dealing with noise and vibration complaints, but it doesn't specify minimum standards. So you could have a protocol in place where a person would put in a call, it would go to voicemail and be answered in a week, or you could have a protocol in which there was a live person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week while the construction was going on, who would have authority to intervene and redirect a construction company that was violating the noise and vibration protocols. What I'd like to know is, how are you going to set the minimum standards for those protocols so that what we have is meaningful? Will we be able to see the noise and vibration monitoring readings on a weekly or monthly basis so that we can check for ourselves that intervention is taking place? Will there be penalties for construction companies that violate the noise and vibration protocols on a regular basis? Right now, what you have is very, very thin, very vague. And you may say this is an environmental assessment, not a construction specification. But frankly, if you don't set out the minimum protocols that we see as protective, then I don't see any reason why we'd accept this as a credible assessment of how the impacts are going to be managed. I have other questions, but I'll start out with that for the evening.
So I'll start off, and hello, MPP Tabbins. Yes, we have a 24-hour call center in place. So yes, those calls will be immediately answered, immediately dealt with, immediately passed on, and that is our guarantee. That is what we will be doing. From the point of view of implementation and monitoring, I'm going to pass that first to Richard and then to Carrie.
Hi, Malcolm. Thanks. Hi, MPP Tabbins. Good to see you again. Absolutely. We do monitor our construction sites quite diligently, and it's an important part of our specification and our tender documents. And as you've said, there are standards that we have to meet that are laid out courtesy of Carrie's team that we put into all our specifications, and the contractors are held to these levels. We do the monitoring, we check to make sure that they are compliant, but we also offer the opportunity for the people who are actually on the ground to make that call to the call center and ask us to intervene if there's a perceived or actual variance to what we've said we would require. Carrie, maybe you want to amplify on those.
Thanks, Richard. And yeah, I think you've covered it quite well. And thanks for the question, MPP Tabbins. So just to really summarize, I think Malcolm and Richard really did cover most of it. We are committed to holding our constructors to stringent standards for noise and vibration before the constructor can begin any work. A very detailed noise and vibration management plan must be submitted to Metrolinx. And this is prescribed in all of our contracts. So no work can advance until Metrolinx is satisfied that the means and methods that we put forward in our contracts can be, not the means and methods, that the standards we put forward in our contracts can be achieved through the means and methods the constructor is utilizing. We require the constructor to provide a detailed outline of exactly where they will be doing their noise and vibration monitoring, and trying to, as best it can, to align with the sensitive receptors along the corridor, including things like heritage properties that we know of. So we'll be able to see that in real time, as you noted, and we can, we can endeavor to look at how we can provide those updates to the community in the best way possible. So that, and we do, and the reason why we ask for that in real time is to make sure that we can take corrective action as quickly as possible if we see that levels are creeping up. So, we set standards, but we actually have sort of alert levels below those standards, so we're notified even when things are starting to creep up towards the limits we've provided. For vibration, there exists City of Toronto vibration bylaws that we adhere to, that are obviously applicable here, that we would subscribe to for all of our construction activity, and that is to ensure that there's no impact or damage to structural damage to homes. So once again, I think just to summarize, we have 24-hour call centers available. We'll have ways to access our community relations folks as much as possible during this process. We will be requiring very specific mitigation measures within our contracts and monitoring to ensure that those are being adhered to. So I think we've tried to build in as much of a safety net as possible in this way, and we will continue to do so. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the answers. If I could just ask a second question to Malcolm. Malcolm, you quoted a cost for the Gerrard and Carlaw Queen stations with a relief line at $300 million each. The Pape Danforth station that is going to be underground and quite complex with the Ontario line, you budgeted in your business case at $220 million. Is it possible that with different design features, the Ontario line stations for underground at Queen and Carlaw and at Gerrard could be much closer to the Pape price tag, or even the $200 million at King and Bathurst?
So number one, the Gerrard station, in order to get down underneath the Midtown Interceptor sewer, was the deepest station in the entire Relief Line South alignment. It was a very, very, very difficult station to build. And the Carlaw station was challenging because of its small site that was available. So for the pricing exercise, we used the TTC rates. We compared it to the work that we had undertaken for the Ontario line. So there was some sharing of information back and forth to be able to analyze it. But it's quite apparent and quite obvious that going underground is much more expensive. And that would be reflected in the business case. So you're right, there might be some small cost savings available, but I wouldn't expect them to be earth-shaking, because we would be following a very similar design as what the TTC was likely going to be doing in these stations.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you. So our next question is from Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Fletcher, thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask that you unmute yourself in order to ask your question live.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's nice to see everyone tonight. I just have two really quick pieces of information that I think people should know one is that City Council just passed a motion yesterday asking Metrolinx to send the wall designs and specifications through to our design review panel and public ground people in order to review that. And I'm hoping that Mr. Verster agrees to that, first thing. Second is that we all know where the Metrolinx property line is in the corridor, but I've recently learned that there's a 30-meter zone of influence on either side that basically Metrolinx can do what they would like there, that the city has no control over that. And we know that the provincial government has tremendous control and will exercise that. But the zone of influence is something that I think, if I can make a suggestion, I think the community needs to know more about that. And my two questions are, when will you actually call the station by its proper name, which is Riverside? We don't call Scarborough Markham or Markham Scarborough, but the station is in Riverside proper. It's not in Leslieville. So that's the first question. And I think we've been raising this with you for a year. I'm quite concerned, and the community and the BIA is very unhappy about that. And then the second question is, in your early works report, and it's in section 8.2.2.1, there's the summary of public feedback. The report summarizes the opposition to the running of the Ontario line above ground as opposition just by several individuals. Can you comment, please? Do you think that's particularly those of you who do public consultation work, do you think that's an appropriate assessment of the breadth and depth of public concern about this proposal? So two things: 30-meter zone of influence that we didn't know about, information about the noise wall. Question, when will you properly name the station that has the proper name geographically? And second, do you think it's really right to say it's just a few individuals in your document? Thank you so much.
Good evening, Councillor Fletcher. I'll answer the first few parts of the question, and nice to speak with you. First off, the name that was given to the station is a working name. Since you pointed it out to us, we've often referred to it as the station serving the Riverside and Leslieville communities. But ultimately, the entire process of naming stations is something that's going to be rolled out. Community input will be sought, as well as the TTC and the city. So don't get too close to the current names. They're just working names. So that was to that one for sure. The next one is the zone of influence. So that 30 meters that you're talking about is an area where we've identified that there may be need for special measures in order to provide access or speed construction. The intent there is that all of those notices on title will be removed at the end of the construction period. And we're actually looking at the suggestion of MPP Tobbins of reviewing that once we get our Progeco on board, to be able to see whether we can narrow that. That's what you used was zone of influence, but it's the notice on titles. And but it's quite expected that we're not going to be executing many, if any, of those rights on the title. So obviously they're out there, they're in place, and we will be keeping close with the community on that. And as it gets developed and as it gets refined, we'll be hopefully reducing that level. So now I'll pass it over to Carrie to answer some of the EA questions.
Sorry, folks, it always takes me a second to get off of mute. Hi, Councillor Fletcher, and thanks for the question. I really appreciate that feedback. We've done our best to capture the feedback that we've heard in our consultation section of the early works report, and really tried to go to great lengths to really capture the feedback that we're hearing. However, if it's something that you feel that we should be elaborating on or reframing in any way, I think this is part of the public review process. So we welcome that feedback, and I think we can do our best to update that language to better reflect what we're hearing here today and what we've heard. Again, we've done our best to convey that and summarize as best we can. We've had as you know, we've met quite a few times, and we've done our best to sort of summarize all of the meetings we've done in a document that is still manageable to read. So we appreciate that feedback, and that's something that we can take as we look to sort of update and finalize our report. So thank you very much.
And I'll also add to that, Councillor Fletcher, you were asking about the wall designs. So we've been working quite closely with the City of Toronto, the Planning Department, the Transportation Services Department, and through the Transit Expansion Office, the engagement with the city is robust and deep, and these walls have been discussed with Parks and Forestry, and all the departments to make sure that what we're putting forward as preliminary concepts for further consultation with the community and the city and Parks and Forestry is robust and well understood, so that we can get the most input we possibly can to make the outcome of these walls and the build of these walls as attractive as possible and fit into the context of the parks in which they're being built. Back to you, Gina.
Thank you, Malcolm. Next up, we have Shelley Klein. Shelley is the chair of our Community Advisory Committee. So thank you, Shelley, for joining us. I'm going to ask that you unmute yourself to ask your question live.
Hi, everybody. Hi, our elected officials, and hello, community. I'm the lead for the Lakeshore East Community Advisory Committee. We have read the early works report for both East Harbour and Joint Corridor, more than 1,000 pages of reports in just under 12 days. So we have 18 days left to comment on your plans before we can begin construction. Our CAC would grade this early works report with an F for fail. Why? Because there is so much information about further impacts and further mitigations missing from these reports. It's astounding that you can begin construction planning against the data that's presented here. And when you finally do present this information, our community will not be able to comment on it any further or change it. So we note that federal funding conditions state that Metrolinx must hold a substantive environmental review and approval process, including an analysis of impacts on the environment and a description of mitigation measures. So missing from this report are the tree removal plan and the arborist report, and yet you are taking trees in November. Missing is a vibration mitigation plan. Nothing. Missing is a detailed construction timeline for the entire joint corridor with the East Harbour area, including the Logan Avenue Bridge and the Pape and Girard area to 2030. That isn't there. Missing is an up-to-date field study to identify specific species at risk and not one that is 5 to 6 years old. Missing is any mention of rail safety plans. And most importantly, missing is a column which compares the current project noise and vibration levels during construction and then post-project operations to an underground alternative. This EWR is a biased assessment of one above grade plan, and it's compared to nothing else. It's a total fail for our community, for transit planning, for the provincial government who would create an environmental assessment process that would even allow for this. And so I am here on behalf of our community to ask Metrolinx to do better. Let's do better for our community, for our children, for our playgrounds, for our community center and our parks. And now I'll ask my question. In the light of that, why is Metrolinx not meeting the standard noise and vibration limits of 55 decibels during the day and 50 decibels during the night as a baseline for the corridor? Your average project with barrier day noise levels are significantly over in terms of 15 decibels over the 55 decibel standard. And we understand you're basing these on a TTC protocol that's 30 years old. But shouldn't you be doing everything you can to meet these existing standard levels for our community? Thank you.
I can address that last question on the noise protocol. So the standards allow for either the higher of 55 dBA during the day and 50 during the night, or the current existing levels. This is, so we're working to the existing levels here, which is standard practice across all noise guidelines, including the most up-to-date ones, the most recent one, NPC 300 in 2013. And it's especially common in big cities where you expect more noise than rural areas. And one more thing to add is we've actually gone beyond the protocol here, since we're trying to work back to existing levels, because technically these protocols allow for a 5 dB increase before calling for mitigation, but we're actually going out of the way here to try to reduce levels as much as we can.
Thanks, Brian. And maybe I will address some of, thanks, Shelley. I appreciate your feedback. I did try to take some notes as you were talking, so perhaps I can address some of the items you referred to in the early works report and provide some clarification. As a start, I did want to note that, you know, you mentioned comparing to an underground option. I think I touched upon this on our last meeting, but I did want to reiterate that with our Ontario Line EA process, as is the case with our transit project assessment process, we start our assessment from a preferred concept or a preferred project. So the idea of the streamlined EA processes for transit projects is that the alternatives assessment has already been completed by the time the EA reports begin. So in this case, the initial business case, that information was brought forward and that preferred design was carried forward into the EA report, and that's what we look at and that's what we assess. Now, I did want to also address some of the notes you had on, you know, further commitments to future reports and studies. And I did want to also take a moment just to explain how we approach an EA report. You know, we look at an EA report as early in the process as we can. So we start with a preliminary design concept. So the detailed design work, as you've heard, is still advancing here. And we are, in some cases, we don't provide all of these reports at this time because they rely so heavily on detailed design. What the EA report provides is a binding commitment to continue to do this work and provide this additional information and detail as we move forward. So a couple things that you did touch on, I think tree removal plans and arborist reports. I think we talked about that already today. Those are being finalized now as we're moving through some of the detailed design. We didn't want to overestimate or underestimate any tree removal, so we're waiting until Richard's team has, you know, really nailed down the exact impacts to every tree, so we can share those reports, and they will be made available very shortly. We're really targeting end of year, worst case early next year. Tree removals that would begin in the corridor, as I've mentioned a couple times tonight, those are associated with an already approved EA process on the Lakeshore East corridor. That was always taking place regardless of the Ontario line or not. Those trees did need to be removed to support the electrification and the GO expansion program. So I recognize that how important the trees and green space are to the community, but that is not new information. That shouldn't come as too much a surprise. With respect to species at risk, yes, we rely on previous reporting, but we also require our during detailed design and before any contractors can start their work to provide updated species at risk surveys, and we do that because we want to get it as close to the time of construction as possible. So we rely on some older surveys to sort of understand what the lay of the land is and potential species that might be there. But we wait till closer to the time to actually understand if there are any, you know, bird nesting, any species at risk that we might be contending with. We have advanced a species at risk permit here, so we already are aware of all of the detailed mitigation that we would need to we would need to follow should we encounter a species at risk, and sort of additional net benefits or overall benefits and improvements for that species. Just looking at vibration mitigation plans. So I think, Brian, maybe you can speak a little bit more to this one, but we do a pretty fulsome vibration assessment here and determine exactly the locations where mitigation is required to meet our standards. We know those standards can be achieved, and in the report that Brian has completed, we provide a whole list of mitigation options that are suitable, and those will be refined, and we'll be selecting the most appropriate options that we know are capable of meeting the standards as we move forward with detailed design, and we can align it with what's most suitable with the design of the corridor. So again, we'll be back out to share that, but the confirmation, the commitment is that we will be adhering to be able to achieve the mitigation required and committing to our noise and vibration standards here. So I did want to, I do appreciate the feedback. I did think that some of that required a little bit of clarification. Apology for the long-winded response, but happy to take any more feedback in writing, and we will happy to respond to any other concerns that you might have. Thanks very much.
Carrie, I'd like to also add, Shelley had indicated the federal government requirements for the environmental assessment. The federal government, the federal ministry did actually come in and audit the Ontario Line project, and we're really testing it against the requirement for a federal environmental assessment. And they came back to us and they said our process was sound, our level of engagement with the city and the TTC was sound, and felt that there was no further need for them to be involved in this at that level. So we are engaged at a federal level, and they are feeding back to us their thoughts and advice on the project as it advances. Back to you, Gina.
Thanks, Malcolm. Our next question is from Mary. Mary, I'll ask that you unmute yourself so you can ask your question live.
Thanks very much. Mary Fragadakis here. So I've read both of your reports. So I'll start off with like comment and observation on the East Harbor one, where you appear to actually not have considered the Gardner takedown at the Carlisle ramp. I mean, the study area map that you provide has to be widened, and you have to look at it within the context of the Gardner takedown, because the collision of works are only going to add to Eastern Avenue's woes. I mean, you state that you're going to issue notifications and advisory signage, which frankly appears to be tinkering at the edges. I mean, they're not really mitigation measures. You're just telling people that the roads are going to be chaotic. With respect to my questions on the joint works construction noise, you list out mitigation measures and you say, establish and apply project-specific construction noise criteria exposure limit. Use construction equipment compliant with noise level specifications in the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. Keep equipment in good working order and operate with effective muffling devices. Evaluate acoustic equipment enclosures for equipment such as compressors and generators, and you list a bunch of other ones. I mean, frankly, these mitigation measures are actually best industry practices. You should be doing that anyways. You're not really offering anything above what's a best practice. So if you could please provide me with some examples of some actual mitigation measures. For example, what are you going to do if the noise is too loud? Are you going to stop the work? That's my first question. Second is on the construction vibration, and that one is where you mention the maximizing the distance between the equipment and the sensitive receivers. Where are those receivers going to be placed? Are they going to be placed next to houses? I mean, if you're operating a crane, are you going to place it as far away from the receiver? I mean, that to me sounds a bit like cheating so that you can get the lowest possible reading.
Mary, hi, it's Malcolm. Nice to talk to you again, too.
Hey, Malcolm.
So the first thing is the sensitive receiver. Those are actually addresses. So I'll give you an example. Font Bond Ministries is considered a sensitive receiver in the context and definition. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that those sensitive receivers, those areas that have sensitivity to noise, are dealt with very specifically with a very good, solid work plan. The other thing I'd like to just quickly mention on the Gardner coordination, the city has a Lower Don precinct coordination group that they've set up, of which Metrolinx and the Ontario line are part of it, to be able to coordinate the multitude of projects that are happening in this area. And you are absolutely right that it is a very big, complicated, challenging place, but we are doing significant amount of traffic modeling to be able to make sure that the city is not gridlocked by the construction, not just by Metrolinx, but by the city, by the Gardner team, by all of the utilities that are also going to be working. So no, that is absolutely vital to us. Now, maybe Carrie, could you just talk a little bit more about how and maybe Brian on the additional mitigation measures that we're applying for the Ontario line in the construction?
Yeah, thanks, Marion. Thanks for the question. So I did take some notes, so hopefully I can address your concerns here. So I think you're asking just sort of, what are some successful noise mitigation techniques during construction, and some of the things that we're committed to employing. You did note a whole laundry list of things, and some of those are best practices. I think some of those are above and beyond standard practices. And so, yes, as a bare minimum, we like to be inclusive, because those are the tables of mitigation that get ported over into our construction contracts. So we like to be exhaustive, even if it's an obvious mitigation. We have to make sure that we hold our constructors accountable for all of it. So some of the ones that I think that are kind of above and beyond, that are known to be quite effective, are increasing heights of hoarding, and increasing, I think Brian mentioned this earlier, increasing the density of the hoarding to ensure that they act as almost noise walls. So those are in place. We can have portable noise screens sometimes if the situation warrants it. I think that actually the real-time noise and vibration monitoring is actually quite a good mitigation measure, because it allows us to keep on top of the noise and vibration levels at all times. I'm not sure that all construction projects take this approach. And it allows us to, check in and see if things are creeping up, or if a mitigation isn't working. We can adequately address that, so we can quickly jump in, talk to the constructor, and see what corrective action we might take. If we need to reevaluate something and look at a different approach, we absolutely will, and we'll do that with our constructor and the design team to see what's appropriate. But those are just some of them. Additional ones that come to mind that are, I think, very effective are enclosures for some of the noisier, like compressors and generators, that tend to cause quite a bit of noise. And then also, it sounds silly, I know, but coordinating the noisier works at times that are more appropriate. So, we don't want to do noisy work into the evening. We want to keep that, and we want to keep some of the noisier activities further away from where people live if we can. So, again, sounds like a silly thing, but we can kind of stage and plan the sites accordingly to the best of our ability. So a lot of those, yes, best management practices, but I think a lot of those are also above and beyond, and we're going to utilize both to ensure that the noise levels and vibration levels are kept to a minimum during construction.
Yep.
Brian,
Carrie, you also mentioned earlier that we are going to have very active noise and vibration monitoring, live streaming of that to our offices. We'll have early alarms set, so we'll know as noise is approaching a level that we can very actively engage. We've got the 24-hour call center set up. So, all of those things lead to live active monitoring of both noise and vibration. We also, work quite closely with the contractors to make sure that we understand what work they're going to be undertaking, so that we understand what noise is going to be generated, and if there is going to be a level of noise that's going to require some form of remediation, that we deal with it up front right away. And So we're working quite closely with PICO. We're going to be communicating with the community of our plans well in advance of them actually happening. Richard?
Yeah, so those are all great, Malcolm, and those are it's absolutely correct. And would add that, you know, as Carrie stated previously, one of the things that we require is a very strict noise and vibration control plan that is reviewed by Metrolinx and our specialist consultants before allowing any contractor to move forward or to move on to site. So we set the standards, we go over it with them, and we make sure we have a clear and concise plan as to how we're going to manage noise and vibration, as well as dust and other things before we get on site, safety, etc. So that's step one, if you will, before you even get started. Part of that is also, I mean, in addition to everything Carrie talked about, is a selection of equipment. As we all know, you know, the more modern equipment tends to be a lot quieter. Modern equipment has been designed with a lot of better noise standards and pollution standards in place. So the kind of what they call the fourth generation equipment standards are much stricter and provide a much quieter operating environment for both anybody around the construction site as well as the people who work on the construction site. So that's very important. And in terms of the monitoring, we set alert levels and we set alarm levels. And as we creep up there, you know, at the alert levels, we start talking to the contractor and say, hey, something's going wrong here. And if we get to high enough levels, then yes, the work will be told to be stopped, and we will figure out what's going on and before we restart. So these are all measures we have in place, and we recognize that we're working in a residential area with sensitive receptors, and we will, you know, we have a thorough and well thought out program to work with the community and to work with the contractors to mitigate any issues that may occur over the construction duration. Back to you, Georgina.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you. Next up, we have Ian. Ian, I'm going to ask that you unmute yourself so you can ask your question live.
Thanks, and thanks everyone for all your insights and feedback today. I want to say a quick thank you to Councillor Fletcher and MPP Tobbins for your great questions and support throughout this. I'd also like to welcome MP De Bruzen and congratulate her on her victory and welcome her to the conversation. I have a unique perspective on this project as I've been, I guess you could call it, fortunate enough to be a resident along the Canada line of Vancouver when that was put in place. So that project had its challenges as well as its successes. And one thing I really want to focus the conversation on in my question is let's move beyond the construction, because let's face it, the construction will be painful for residents regardless of what happens. Canada Line was very painful. Many businesses were impacted as well. And I think, you know, some of that will happen here as well. Let's park that and let's look at now the long-term livability of our community. My concern with this project is to use and just purely from a sound perspective, to use the sound analogy that the gentleman gave earlier. We're going to move from, albeit there are noises throughout the day with the GO train, we're going to move into a permanent state of tinnitus in our community. We'll have bigger parks. We're going to have a constant noise level that will not be livable and will impact the livelihood and viability of the community. How has that been factored into the assessments that have been going on? I heard no talk about that. And how has that been factored into the benefits in the business case for having the line above ground?
Hi there. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Sure, I was just going to speak to the noise level component of that. It's factored into the LEQ 16 hours and the LEQ 8 hours within the report. Those metrics take into account every pass-by, and you can see the pass-bys and what they are in Appendix C of that report. And yes, there will be more pass-bys, but with the noise barriers in place, we're expecting them to be significantly quieter, and noise level, the average noise level should be either existing or lower at the majority of receptors.
Right. Thanks, Brian. So just to reconfirm that, we appreciate that question, but I think we understand the concern, and we've heard that concern about noise in the community, and so we have a typical criteria that we follow that's dictated by the regulator or Ministry of Environment. In this instance, we've endeavored to go beyond our criteria to not just propose mitigation where we have a perceived significant increase, but to provide seamless noise walls along the corridor to really just maximize the benefit that we can to reduce noise. So we are looking, as Brian said, we are looking at an average noise level, both passed by an average noise level that's going to be quieter in most cases than it is today, or at least at the same level. So really shouldn't be significantly more than what you're experiencing now. So we'll really appreciate the question, but we hope that the mitigation has dealt with this concern. So Malcolm, anything else to add there?
No, so yeah, as part of the business case, we do look at all sorts of strategic benefits associated with the various alignments. And the goal, obviously, is to, when we're comparing them, compare that we have the ability to mitigate, as Carrie said, some of the perceived items that or challenges that we have. And noise is one of them, and you've brought it up, and the work that we're doing and the level of mitigation that we're currently undertaking is having very positive results, and we're not done. We're still looking at other ways that we can do further mitigation to even improve it more. So let's keep engaged. Let's keep discussing it, but let's advance the conversation to get an even better outcome than we currently have right now. Back to you, Joseph.
Gina. It's Joe, Gina. Our panelists have been going now for well over 90 minutes. We're running over time, and we want to be sure that we get questions in, but I'm wondering whether we might be able to wrap it up after the next question. Is that possible, or do you have many more questions there?
Hi, Joe. We only have three more questions if possible, and then we'll cut it off after that. Is that okay?
Well, do you think it would be fair to ask the questioners if they could make their questions fairly brief? And I'm sure our panelists will be motivated to be very direct in their answers as well.
Yes, I agree. I think that is fair. Thank you. Next up, we have Rosemary. Rosemary, I'm just going to ask you to unmute yourself, and hopefully you can have a brief question so that we can get to the others.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. So people who live and play along the rail corridor know that eastbound trains that are going uphill are much noisier than the westbound trains that are going downhill. Many of your noise simulations use westbound trains. This could affect all of your calculations unless the modeling distinguishes noise level by direction. So does your noise model do that? If so, how can we see that in the data tables? And just to follow up from that last thing, it's exactly what we're talking about. You're talking about average sounds. It's not the average, it's the breakthrough sounds that we care about. It's the sound, at Degrassi, your simulation has a train passing by. What about the sound of the train stopping? What about the announcements? What about all these breakthrough sounds? And what about simultaneous trains? We've got 1,500 trains a day. You're going to not just have single pass-bys. You're going to have a GO train at exactly the same time as an Ontario line train. And we want to know the data about what happens when these trains go by at the same time. So that's kind of all the questions about the noise data does not tell us what we want to hear. So please tell us how to interpret your data and give us better data. Thank you.
So sure, I can speak to that. The noise model certainly does consider train speeds, and as such, you can kind of tell which direction they're going, whether they're accelerating or not. as far as the immersive sound demos go, yeah, we've been hearing some feedback for those for implementing like multiple pass-bys at the same time and things like of that nature. And I do think that's great feedback. The nature of these were kind of a really new project, and the intent of these was just to show the difference in noise characteristic between the Ontario line trains and the GO trains, kind of the nice electric train versus the diesels coming in and then leaving with the locomotive noise, and then to get an idea of the noise difference in a pass-by with a noise barrier in place. But I do appreciate the rest of the feedback on those sound demos, and I think we would look at implementing those in the future. Did I miss any questions there? There was kind of a lot there.
I think you've got it, Brian. Thank you. And
yes, thank you. The next question we have is from Tony. Tony, I'm going to ask that you unmute yourself so you can ask your question next. And please make it brief so that we can get to the next one. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Just again, discuss mostly the noise, just for Brian's edification. Brian, we're going from 170 trains a day now to 1,500 in the 2030s. 900 Ontario line and 600 GO train via rail, whatever. So that is where the noise is going to be the issue. Ian said earlier, the constant noise 24/7. And we're living, those of us who are backing onto the tracks are going to notice significant changes there that you need to be aware of. And we are going to have multiple trains going by at the same time, given the volume. But my question to you is, to the panel, is that you've still only given us one choice of noise wall material. And from the early works, you've only modeled one. And we've had discussions with you before. We've sent you notes recently that clear walls are not acceptable. The transparent walls are not acceptable to those who are backing onto the tracks. Where I live, when I purchased my home, the developer was required to build a berm and a 6-foot fence above the berm to mitigate sound and vibration at the time. And we want that to be continued. We don't want to see GO trains going by our backyard with people in the trains looking at us every day. We'd like it to be covered up. And I know that there's been discussions as to the heights. I just want to clarify, it's 5 meters for the noise wall, that's the height. It's the retaining wall height that's going to vary between 0 and 7 meters, or different heights along the wall. So I just want, we're talking pretty much about the transparent noise walls. We'd like to see other designs which are more solid in nature, that hide the trains. We also want to see more work done on the retaining walls. Are they going to be terraced? What's the vegetation going to be along them to take away from the stark look of them? These are all things that need to be discussed. You're showing all these pictures with these transparent walls as though it's a fait accompli. It certainly should not be a fait accompli. And I can tell you that my neighbors and myself and other people I've spoken to on the route are not in agreement with this. And we want to see some alternative solutions. And when the architect, or John, was here 2 weeks ago, he gave me the impression he would be doing that, but we don't see anything today, and not in the report either. Thank you.
Yeah, Tony, hi, it's Malcolm. So yeah, at our last meeting, we committed to looking at the opacity of the noise walls and the different materials. That's exactly what the community outreach on the website is all about. And John Potter, who was on the panel last time we spoke, took that away also. So no, we've heard you loud and clear. And we certainly are going to gather all your comments on this and be able to respond and meet with you individually, obviously, as people that are right adjacent to the corridor. We'll absolutely be there to have this discussion with you. Gina, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Malcolm. Our last question is from Lucas. Lucas, please unmute yourself to ask your question live.
Hello. Thank you for hosting this community consultation. It's important to keep the public informed about these decisions about major infrastructure. My question is, I looked it up on the internet, and it's this Ontario line, it's projected to cost like over $10 billion. I was wondering, like, despite all the your justifications for not going underground and for like sewers and stuff like that and other mitigations or some of that, I just find this infrastructure is gonna be here for like 50 years and stuff like that. I realize that we don't want to be spending like tremendous amounts of money, like going like 20 more billions dollars, but it just, because we don't want to put a burden on our grandchildren and with the amount of debt, but we want to make sure we get it right. And it, as per all I hear a lot of disagreements with people in this call. It just feels like we're not like if enough emphasis on the dollar figure is enough acknowledged into it, I just find. So if I don't know what you can say too much, but I just would like just to know, like, why is there only like this amount of dollar figure for the amount of adaptations to the project, please?
Okay, Lucas, thank you very much for the question. So it's much more than just dollars, okay? The Ontario line, from its very end at Exhibition all the way through to the Science Centre, it's in a depressed at-grade facility at its beginning at Exhibition. It runs underground through the deep core of the city. It comes out in the Don Yard to an above ground alignment for a good exchange at East Harbour at the East Harbour Station with the GO transit network. There it was then a presentation, an opportunity to be able to use the lands that are currently owned by Metrolinx to run essentially an at-grade alignment through this area. So we have multiple typologies for this, and you see these all over the world. You see them in Toronto. Line 1 and Line 2 run both underground and at grade. The SRT was above grade. So this is not necessarily new, but what is new is the fact that we have new modern technology that's coming with the Ontario line. They're quieter trains. They're fully automated. We have platform edge doors, so that the announcements that are made inside a station are kept inside the station. We've removed the human error from acceleration and deceleration. There's a multitude of good transit benefits for access that are the result of either an above grade or elevated station. The ride is more pleasant for our transit user to have the sun streaming in during the ride. So there's a lot of good things that are a result of this, and those things that are challenging for us, we are absolutely going about mitigating. And the result is that we are building 15.6 kilometers, 15 stations for the Ontario line for a little bit more than what the Relief Line South was going to cost. We're getting transit into areas like Thorncliffe Park, Flemington Park, and the underserved Liberty Village. So the Relief Line South was only going to go from Pape through to Osgood. So this additional extension is all good transit solutions. So it's not just dollars, but the ability for us to get more transit to more people at roughly the same time and just a little bit more money is a really encouraging outcome for the building and providing transit in Toronto. So I do want to say it's much more than just about the money. It is about the experience. It is about serving as many people as possible. So with that, I'll send it back to you, Joseph.
Well, thank you for that very much. Thank you, Gina, and thank you to everybody who was in the Zoom room. Your questions were thought-provoking, demanding, and clearly show that the community cares. Thank you to the panelists, Richard, Malcolm, Carrie, Brian. You worked hard to respond. You gave a lot of information. And to everybody who's participating, this is the end of tonight, but this is not the end of the process. If you just look at the top right of your page, you'll see the East Segment Design Consultation with the survey, the yellow button that says have your say that I believe it was Malcolm referred to. The Lakeshore East Early Works Report, you can click on the Learn More button. You can go there, download the complete report if you haven't done it yet. You can see pages on the different topics on every one of the environmental topics. There's a place for you to provide your input after you've reviewed that. East Harbor Station, design priorities, and the sound demonstration is right there that we've talked about. So all of these things are here for you, plus the green Contact Us button at the top. If you want to contact the team, they'll be responding to you. Tomorrow, the video of tonight's meeting will be there if you want to review it. And over time, Metrolinx will be going through all of the written questions and making sure that they respond to the topics. Not necessarily every single question because there's some overlap, but they'll respond to all of the topics so you can come back here and you can see evidence of what's gone on. You can check your notes. Again, thank you. This is part of a process. Thank you for participating. Please stay home and stay healthy.